You're on a tissue box in New York City right now. Hello. Hi everyone. My name is Kyla. Welcome to my channel where I check out the stock market and the economy, amongst other things. So I'm so sorry about this angle. You would think I'd have it figured out by now, but clearly no. And I'm going to talk about how we don't have the economy figured out right now either. So today I wanted to talk about a non-recession recession, a job-full recession, my theory of the vibe session, right? This idea that things are relatively okay, but not okay enough to be labeled capital O-okay. It's good enough, but not great. And this is actually something that we've been talking about a bunch on the channel, expectations, theory, reality. I even gave a presentation at Bloomberg Invest 2 days ago about it, where it's this idea of like, we have this moderate, reasonable, fine, passable economy and how bad that can feel, especially if you're on social media. Idea that things are decent, but I am doubtful, therefore everything is dire. There's a quote from a member of Congress about the debt ceiling that I think is really thoughtful. It's this idea that we're only measuring success on how much we lost, and that broadly applies to the entire economy, right? And my feelings on the debt ceiling are very well known. I've made a bunch of videos on it. I think it's the stupidest thing in the world. And I think when we have policy in place like that, where it enables us to, some people would say that we're having conversations about spending, but we certainly are not, right? That is political theater, what's going on. And it's policy that is regret minimization rather than goodness maximizing. And of course, things are going to feel dire. And if you're like, well, we need to have a way to twist people's arms so we have conversations about spending, I really ask you to just Google what the debt ceiling is and maybe read about it, because that's like not what that is. But I've talked enough about the debt ceiling and in other formats. And what we are thinking about here, measuring success and how much we lost, that's a form of loss aversion bias. People hate not having things, and they tend to focus more on what could disappear rather than what could be gained. And that, of course, applies to markets. It'll go up again, bro, is what a lot of bag holders tend to say. But what's sort of funny about loss aversion bias is there is success, right? Like there is some element of hope of things being okay again. It just comes in that pretty inverted package. He who runs a podcast and does investing in the tech space tweeted something the other day, and he DM'd me to say it's not his opinion, and I was like, okay, sure, but I find the take that he did tweet to be so tired and so old and so useless and so looped, because every generation ever has complained about those younger than them not working hard and being lazy and whatever. So what he tweeted was, spoke to 4 recruiters, which is a small sample size, over the last 2 days, 2 common patterns with people under 30 and working. Number 1, they don't want to work as hard and they don't want to work from an office. For all of those not in the camps above, congrats, you are now massively advantaged. And it's like the idea that the younger generation doesn't want to work hard. And of course they don't want to work from an office. Have you seen office spaces? They are terrible. Liminal lighting. And it's sort of like being the older sibling, I think, when we do have these conversations, where if you are an older sibling, like I'm an older sister to a great younger brother, but when you watch your younger sibling frolic around after you feel like you did all of this, work for them, and every older sibling feels this way, to just be able to frolic with such bliss, the question that you keep on asking yourself, well, when is it my turn to frolic? I would also like to roll around in a field of daisies. Like, what about me and my feelings? Like, that is the gap between the older and younger generations, is somewhat of a relationship of older and younger sibling. And it's an old and useless and tired trope of people don't want to work anymore is like that too, right? Like, it's just useless. A lot of people want to frolic, but they feel like they can't. And the subsequent sentiment that carries is a thematic that can be applied to the economy at large. Of course, people are mostly fine, and some might even say that people are somewhat frolicking. But if you don't feel like you can frolic, are you frolicking at all? And to be clear, like, nothing ever exists in a binary. There are some flashing red bells in terms of the speed at which things are becoming decidedly less unfine. But across the board, things are relatively okay-ish, something that I've covered in depth over at Bloomberg Opinion, which is something to celebrate. Americans are broadly happy with their own personal finances, but a majority consistently and thinks erroneously that we are in a recession, and just 18% think that the national economy is in good shape. We aren't in a recession. Jobs were good. Like, the United States is doing relatively decent. Economy is humming along. Inflation is sort of going down. And people tend to see that in their own lives. Like, they're like, oh, I'm doing okay. Like, I'm doing fine. But then they look outside to things like the debt ceiling. And it's like, yes, let's waste the equivalent of 5 years of spending for the National Park Service on something that is a political football. It does not need to exist. Is America's political hellscape the fact that we have this thing that is a waste of time and a waste of money, and people are watching that unfold? Like, of course the vibes are going to be off, but we also have no concept of measurement. Adam Mastroianni, sorry if I said his name wrong, it's a really, really good paper. So I wrote a paper on the illusion of moral decline, on the idea that many people have that people are morally getting worse and people are not getting morally worse. It's really a good paper. In it, he says, and look, it's fine to have strong opinions about things you know nothing about. That's kind of what the internet is for. But it's not fine when those strong opinions lead to demands for actual changes in the world. If you think that morality is declining, then you must think that some switch has been flipped in society, causing it to produce worse humans. The trend doesn't exist. It's like activating the sprinkler system in a building that's not on fire. And that's so much of everything. Like Derek Thompson, who's amazing, wrote Everything is Terrible, But I'm Fine. And that idea where everything is terrible but I'm fine really complicates policy that could make the everything is terrible part get better, because people are like, well, I'm doing okay, things don't need to be fine for everybody, I'm okay. Because most Americans say that they're personally fine, they might resist too much experimentation. This creates a confusing voting bloc, which is constantly angry about the state of things, but also fundamentally conservative about any change that overturns their rather happy life and least okay finances. And I've written about the art of the doomer before. Adam wrote about it too. Crying fire is what aspiring despots do, by the way. They cry catastrophe as a way of justifying their extreme measures. Things are going to hell, but make me king and I'll fix it all. Our brains just love looping around big scary things, especially when it's amplified by social media, right? Like, make it all feel bad. And just to be incredibly clear, there are things to feel bad about. That's one thing that I hopefully get across on this channel, is that there's nuance. When you hear me saying, well, we're not in a recession, it's not me saying like things are awesome and good and amazing and we should be celebrating all the time, all the days. No, like, we have a life, we live a life, and life itself has polarity. So student loan payments could be restarting. New York City was literally like red the other day, where I am right now. And that's bad for our brains. Funnily enough, I was also in Denver when Denver was getting smoke from the Canada wildfires, and also from Los Angeles, who had just fires in California. Real wages are being squeezed by inflation. Service sector indicators are slumping. Big pharma manages to get goofier and more evil. Homes are pretty expensive, and the share of adults who said that they were worse off financially than a year earlier rose to 35%. Usually, like, the part, if you've been following the past couple YouTubes, where I would say something like, but listen, everyone, there's also so many things to feel good about, like, look at jobs, look at inflation going down. The economy is somewhat surprisingly mostly okay. But I think, again, this line from Adam encapsulates so much. It's very easy to feel like you know something about the past without actually knowing anything about the past. I just showed you data from more than 500,000 people who were asked whether morality has declined, and virtually none of them said, gosh, I don't know. But for them, that was the right answer. They don't know. It took us years and another 12 million people to come up with an even halfway decent answer, which is probably not. And yet an answer came to everyone's minds effortlessly, and they're happy to share it and even back it up when we ask them more about it. The past is a foreign country, but we all have the vivid delusion that we've lived there for a long time and know everything about it. Sort of the deal, right? Like, we just don't know. And what we do within that is somewhat of a protective mechanism of sorts, a way to say, well, if things do get bad, I never got my hopes up, fell apart. It's like, well, I never was that excited to begin with. And we tend to confuse that uncertainty, though, with badness. And we live in a highly uncertain world. And I do this a lot in my own life, where if I feel like I don't know about something, which increasingly feels like the case, it's way easier for me to catastrophize that and say, well, clearly this is apocalyptic, rather than reasonably assess that the uncertainty itself just means that I don't have the answer. Not that the answer itself is bad. But when we have things like tired tropes, like the youngins suck and I'm not going to support their career journey, complete fabrication of what data is saying in order to spew some narrative or pump some bags, hello David Sachs and Pelagi, that's when things begin to feel worse. The uncertainty doesn't become something that can be wrangled into goodness, it becomes something that is choking us into badness. Look around at the gaps between theory and data and reality. A lot of it is that. It's uncertainty of social media, it's loud tweeters, there's a margin of error that has to be built in for the I don't really know, which is tough in the age of infinite knowledge, but it's something to keep in mind when we look at sentiment or have broader discussions on how things are. People are uncertain, that uncertainty turns to fear, fear is scary, and that's how we end up where we are sometimes. So there's a comic for those listening via the podcast version, let's appreciate, that says, my people treat truths as objects, solid things, but I learned from practice in the teaching of masters that truth is fluid. It moves and changes shapes with its surroundings, and it cuts through everything in its path on the way to the sea. I can't wait to bring this truth to my people. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks so much for spending time with me. This is Kyla.substack.com. Podcast is Let's Appreciate. I'm on TikTok, YouTube. Questions, comments, feel free to leave them below. Hit the like button if you like the video. Go ahead and hit subscribe. You know, the general social media antics. I hope y'all are doing okay, and I'll talk to you very soon.